You're born on the forest floor of New Zealand, nestled inside a shallow scrape that your mother carved out between the roots of a massive rimu tree. It's not much of a nest, just a depression lined with whatever soft materials she could find: moss, fern fronds, and the occasional feather. But it's hidden, and right now, hidden is what matters most. You're not alone. There's another egg next to you, maybe two if your mother had a particularly good breeding season. But let's be honest, the odds weren't great to begin with. Your mother only breeds every few years, and only when the rimu trees are heavy with fruit. This year, the trees delivered, so here you are. For the first few weeks, you're completely helpless. You can't see, you can't walk, and you definitely can't fly. Flying isn't really an option for your species anyway, but we'll get to that later. Your mother stays close, keeping you warm under her feathers. She's massive compared to you, one of the heaviest parrots in the world, and her body heat is the only thing keeping you alive in the cool, damp forest. Feeding time is simple, but crucial. Your mother regurgitates partially digested fruit and leaves directly into your beak. It's not appetizing by human standards, but it's exactly what you need. The food is soft, nutritious, and pre-processed, which is perfect because your digestive system isn't ready for anything more challenging. She feeds you several times a day, and between meals, you mostly sleep. The world outside your nest is dangerous, but you don't know that yet. There are stoats out there, small, fast predators that can slip through the smallest gaps. There are cats, both feral and domestic, that hunt at night when your kind is most active. There are rats that will eat your eggs if they find them, and possums that compete for the same food sources your family depends on. But your mother chose this spot carefully. It's tucked away, difficult to reach, and well camouflaged. After about 10 weeks, something changes. Your downy baby feathers start falling out, replaced by the mottled green and yellow plumage that will keep you hidden in the forest for the rest of your life. You're getting bigger, stronger, and more curious about the world beyond the nest. Your mother notices this and starts taking you on short trips. These first adventures are clumsy affairs. You stumble over roots, get tangled in low-hanging vines, and make far too much noise for a species that relies on stealth to survive. But your mother is patient. She shows you which plants are safe to eat, how to move quietly through the underbrush, and most importantly, how to recognize the sounds that mean danger. Learning to forage is a slow process. Your mother demonstrates by example, showing you how to strip seeds from grass stalks, how to dig up roots, and how to find the ripest fruits. You copy her movements, but your technique is terrible. You drop more food than you eat, and half the time, you're not even sure what you're supposed to be looking for. But hunger is a good teacher, and gradually, you start to figure it out. One evening, while you're practicing your foraging skills, you hear something that makes your blood freeze. It's a sharp, chittering sound coming from somewhere in the darkness. Your mother immediately goes still, her body pressed low against the ground. You don't understand what's happening, but you copy her posture instinctively. The sound gets closer, then stops. After what feels like hours, but is probably only a few minutes, your mother relaxes. The stoat has moved on, but the message is clear. The forest is full of things that want to kill you. As the weeks pass, you become more independent. You're still staying close to your mother, but you're starting to explore on your own. You discover that your feet are incredibly strong, perfect for gripping branches and climbing steep surfaces. Your beak is powerful too, capable of cracking open tough seeds and stripping bark from trees. What you don't have, and what sets you apart from almost every other bird on the planet, is the ability to fly. Your wings are small, almost vestigial. They're useful for balance when you're climbing or gliding down from a height, but they'll never lift you into the sky. This might seem like a disadvantage, but for millions of years, your ancestors thrived without flight. New Zealand had no land predators before humans arrived, so there was no evolutionary pressure to stay airborne. Your species became ground-dwelling specialists, perfectly adapted to life on the forest floor. But that was before the world changed. Now, being flightless makes you vulnerable in ways your ancestors never had to worry about. When danger approaches, you can't just take to the sky. You have to rely on stealth, speed, and your incredible ability to freeze in place and become invisible among the forest vegetation. Your mother starts teaching you these survival skills through a series of games that don't feel like games at all. She'll suddenly stop moving and remain motionless for long periods, testing your ability to do the same. She'll lead you through obstacle courses of fallen logs and dense vegetation, building your agility and teaching you to move without making noise. Most importantly, she teaches you to read the forest, to recognize the difference between the normal sounds of night and the subtle changes that might signal danger. Food becomes an obsession, and for good reason. Your species has one of the most inefficient metabolisms in the bird world. You need to eat constantly just to maintain your body weight, and during the breeding season, the demands are even higher. Your mother shows you where to find the best feeding spots, clearings where native grasses grow thick, fruit trees that drop their bounty at predictable times, and hidden caches where you can store food for lean periods. But finding food is only half the battle. You also have to avoid becoming food. The introduced predators that now dominate New Zealand's forests are efficient killers, and they've had decades to perfect their hunting techniques. Stoats are perhaps the worst, small enough to follow you into tight spaces, fast enough to catch you in the open, and smart enough to learn your patterns. They hunt primarily at night, which is unfortunate because that's when you're most active too. Your mother teaches you the art of the freeze response. When you hear something suspicious, you drop to the ground and become a statue. Your mottled plumage blends perfectly with the forest floor, and if you stay absolutely still, even a predator passing within arm's reach might miss you entirely. But the freeze only works if you commit to it completely. One twitch, one nervous movement, and you're dead. The learning process is intense and unforgiving. There are no second chances as in the wild, and your mother knows it. She's already lost siblings to predators, and she's seen entire family groups wiped out in a single night. Her job is to give you the skills you need to survive, and she takes that responsibility seriously. As autumn approaches, your independence grows. You're spending more time away from your mother, exploring territories that will eventually become your own. You're learning to read the subtle signs that indicate good habitat, the types of plants that grow in areas with rich soil, the moisture levels that support the most diverse food sources, and the terrain features that provide the best protection from predators. But you're also learning about competition. Other kakapo live in this forest, and they all need the same resources you do. Territory disputes are rare. Your species isn't particularly aggressive, but they do happen. When they do, it's usually a matter of persistence rather than violence. You'll occupy the same feeding area as another bird night after night until one of you decides it's not worth the stress and moves on. Your voice is developing too. Adult kakapo have a complex repertoire of calls, each with its own meaning and purpose. There are contact calls for staying in touch with family members, alarm calls for warning others about danger, and territorial calls for establishing your presence in an area. You're still learning the nuances, but you're getting better at communicating with the other birds in your area. The most important calls, though, are the ones you won't need for several years yet. Adult males produce booming calls during the breeding season, deep, resonant sounds that can travel for kilometers through the forest. These calls are how males attract females and establish their dominance over other males. You're too young to participate in this ritual, but you listen to the older males and start to understand the complex social dynamics that will eventually govern your adult life. Winter arrives gradually, bringing shorter days and cooler temperatures. Food becomes scarcer, and the competition for resources intensifies. Your mother's visits become less frequent, and you realize that your childhood is essentially over. You're not fully adult yet. That won't happen for several more years, but you're no longer dependent on parental care. This is when many young kakapo don't make it. The transition from dependent juvenile to independent subadult is fraught with dangers. You have to establish your own territory, find reliable food sources, and avoid predators without the safety net of your mother's protection. Some birds choose poorly and end up in areas that can't support them through the lean months. Others are simply unlucky and encounter predators during vulnerable moments. But you're one of the fortunate ones. The skills your mother taught you serve you well, and you manage to carve out a small territory in a promising area. It's not prime real estate. That's controlled by older, more experienced birds, but it has enough food sources to keep you alive and enough cover to keep you hidden. As your first winter as an independent bird progresses, you start to understand just how precarious your existence really is. You're part of one of the world's rarest bird species, with a total population that can be counted in the hundreds. Every individual matters, and every death is a tragedy for the species as a whole. You don't know it yet, but humans are watching. Conservation teams monitor every known kakapo, tracking their movements, health, and breeding success. You'll eventually be fitted with a radio transmitter, given a name, and become part of an intensive management program designed to save your species from extinction. But for now, you're just a young bird trying to survive in a forest that's beautiful, dangerous, and utterly unforgiving. The night sounds of the forest become your soundtrack. The calls of moorpork owls, the rustling of possums in the canopy, the distant crash of waves against the coastline. You're learning to navigate by these sounds, to read the forest like a map written in audio. Each sound tells a story, and understanding these stories is the key to survival. Your first winter alone is harsh, but educational. You learn which foods provide the most energy, which routes through your territory are safest, and which times of night offer the best foraging opportunities. You also learn about loneliness. Kakapo are naturally social birds, but the low population density means you might go weeks without encountering another member of your species. You survive your first winter, but just barely. There were nights when the cold bit through your feathers, when food was so scarce you wondered if you'd see another dawn. But you made it, and that counts for something. Spring brings relief and new challenges. The forest comes alive again, fruit trees blossom, and the competition for resources shifts into a different gear. You're about a year old now, still growing, still learning. Your body is filling out, but you won't reach full adult size for another few years. What you lack in size, you're starting to make up for in experience. You know your territory like the back of your wing, every fallen log, every fruiting tree, every safe route between feeding areas. But spring also brings something else, your first real encounter with humans. You're foraging in a clearing when you hear voices, footsteps crashing through the underbrush with all the subtlety of a landslide. Your freeze response kicks in immediately. You drop to the ground and become part of the forest floor, every muscle locked in place. The humans pass close enough that you can smell them, an odd mixture of soap, sweat, and something chemical you can't identify. They're talking in low voices, scanning the area with strange devices. You don't understand what they're doing, but every instinct tells you to stay hidden. After what feels like hours, they move on, leaving behind only the fading sound of their footsteps and a lingering scent that makes your feathers prickle with unease. What you don't realize is that those humans were looking for you, not you specifically, but any kakapo they could find. The conservation team has been tracking radio signals in this area, trying to account for every bird in the population. You're still untagged, still officially unknown to the recovery program, but that won't last much longer. As the months pass, you encounter more signs of human activity, strange scents on the wind, the distant sound of helicopters, and occasionally artificial structures that don't belong in the forest. There are tracking tunnels, wooden boxes with ink pads inside, designed to record the footprints of any creature that passes through. There are bait stations filled with poison, targeting the introduced predators that threaten your species. And there are motion-activated cameras, silently documenting the secret lives of forest creatures. You avoid these human artifacts instinctively, but you can't avoid them entirely. The forest is too small, and the human presence too pervasive. One night, while investigating a new fruiting tree, you trigger a camera trap. The flash startles you so badly that you leap sideways, crash into a low branch, and spend the next few minutes trying to figure out what just happened. The camera captures it all. Your surprise, your awkward recovery, and your cautious approach as you try to determine if the mysterious device poses a threat. That photograph will eventually end up in a database, analyzed by researchers who will note your approximate age, condition, and location. They'll assign you a temporary identification number and add you to their list of birds to capture and tag. But for now, you're just confused and slightly embarrassed by your ungraceful reaction to a harmless flash of light. Your second winter is easier than your first. You know where to find food during the lean months. You've identified reliable shelter sites, and you've developed a network of safe routes throughout your territory. You're also getting stronger and more confident. When a young male kakapo wanders into your feeding area, you don't immediately retreat. Instead, you hold your ground, using body language and soft vocalizations to communicate your ownership of the space. The encounter is tense but brief. The intruder is roughly your age, probably also looking for a territory to call his own. You face off for several minutes, neither of you willing to back down immediately. Finally, he makes the decision to leave, not because you're bigger or stronger, but because you were there first and you projected confidence. It's a small victory, but it feels significant. As you mature, your calls become more sophisticated. You're developing the vocal repertoire that will serve you throughout your adult life. The soft contact calls that help you stay in touch with distant neighbors, the alarm calls that warn others about predators, and gradually, the deeper, more resonant calls that will eventually become part of your breeding display. You practice these calls during quiet moments, usually just before dawn, when the forest is still and sound carries well. Your voice is changing, deepening, gaining the power and range that adult males need to attract mates. You're still years away from your first breeding season, but your body is already preparing for that distant possibility. The forest around you is changing too. Some changes are subtle, the gradual shift in vegetation as certain plants outcompete others, the seasonal variations in fruit and seed production that determine where you can find food. Other changes are more dramatic. You witness your first predator control operation when helicopters arrive to drop poison baits throughout the forest. The operation is designed to reduce the number of stoats, rats, and possums, but it creates chaos in the short term. For several days, the forest is full of unfamiliar sounds and smells. The helicopters are loud and disruptive, forcing you to take shelter in the densest vegetation you can find. The poison baits smell wrong, and you instinctively avoid them, but other creatures aren't so fortunate. You find dead rats along your regular routes, and the usual nighttime chorus of possum calls grows noticeably quieter. The operation is successful from a conservation standpoint. The predator population drops significantly, giving native species like you a better chance of survival. But in the immediate aftermath, the forest feels different, quieter in some ways, but also more unpredictable. The ecological balance has shifted, and it will take time for the various species to adjust to their new reality. You're about 2 years old when you have your first close encounter with a stoat. You're foraging in thick undergrowth when you catch a scent that makes every feather on your body stand up. It's musky, sharp, and utterly terrifying on a level that bypasses conscious thought and goes straight to your survival instincts. The stoat is hunting, moving through the forest with predatory focus. You freeze immediately, pressing yourself against the base of a tree fern and willing yourself to become invisible. The stoat passes within 2 meters of your position, close enough that you can hear its breathing, close enough that you can see the way its nose twitches as it tests the air for scents. For 10 minutes, you don't move a muscle. The stoat investigates the area thoroughly, clearly aware that prey is nearby, but unable to pinpoint your exact location. Your camouflage holds, your nerve holds, and eventually the predator moves on to hunt elsewhere. When you finally allow yourself to breathe normally again, you're shaking with residual adrenaline. The encounter serves as a stark reminder of how dangerous your world really is. You're getting bigger and stronger, but you're still vulnerable to predators that are faster, more agile, and specifically adapted for killing birds like you. The only advantages you have are your camouflage, your ability to freeze in place, and your intimate knowledge of the forest terrain. Your territory expands as you grow more confident. You're claiming prime feeding areas that were previously controlled by older birds, and you're exploring regions of the forest that you've never seen before. Some of these areas are spectacular, hidden valleys filled with ancient trees, clearings carpeted with native plants, streams that provide both water and the insects that live along their banks. Other areas are less appealing, but equally important to understand. Steep slopes, where the soil is thin and food scarce. Dense thickets, where visibility is limited and predators could be anywhere. Open areas where you feel exposed and vulnerable, but which sometimes contain the richest feeding opportunities. You're creating a mental map of the forest that will serve you for the rest of your life. Every tree, every slope, every potential danger and opportunity is being cataloged and remembered. This knowledge will become crucial during emergency situations when you need to find the fastest route to safety or locate food during periods of scarcity. Your social skills are developing alongside your territorial knowledge. You encounter other kakapo more frequently now, and these meetings are becoming less awkward and more predictable. There are established protocols for these encounters, ways of communicating your intentions, your territorial boundaries, and your willingness to share resources or defend them. Most interactions are peaceful. Kakapo aren't naturally aggressive birds, and in a population as small as yours, Every individual is too valuable to risk in unnecessary conflicts. But there are tensions, particularly around the best feeding sites during times when food is scarce. You learn to read the subtle signals that indicate whether another bird is willing to share space or whether you should find somewhere else to forage. You also learn about the social hierarchy that exists within the population. Older, more experienced birds command respect and usually get first access to the best resources. Younger birds like yourself have to be more flexible, more willing to adapt to changing circumstances, and make do with second choice feeding areas. But age isn't the only factor that determines social status. Size matters, as does personality. Some birds are naturally more assertive, more willing to stand their ground in territorial disputes. Others are more diplomatic, finding ways to coexist peacefully, even in crowded conditions. You're discovering which type you are, not the most aggressive bird in the forest, but certainly not the most submissive either. As your third year begins, you start noticing changes in your behavior that signal approaching maturity. Your calls are becoming more complex and powerful. Your movements are more confident, less cautious than they were as a juvenile. And for the first time, you're starting to pay attention to the territorial displays of adult males during breeding season. These displays are spectacular events that occur every few years when forest conditions are just right. Males establish booming territories, areas where they create bowl-shaped depressions in the ground and produce deep, resonant calls that can be heard for kilometers. The calls are designed to attract females, but they also serve as challenges to other males. You're too young to participate yet, but you watch from a distance, learning the complex rituals that govern kakapo reproduction. The positioning of the bowls, the timing of the calls, the intricate courtship behaviors that determine which males get the opportunity to mate. It's all fascinating and slightly intimidating, a preview of the challenges and opportunities that await you in the years ahead. Human activity in the forest continues to increase. The conservation team is becoming more aggressive about monitoring and managing the population, and you're starting to see the effects of their work. New predator-proof fences appear overnight, creating safe zones where kakapo can feed without fear of attack. Supplementary food stations are established in strategic locations, providing high-quality nutrition during times when natural food sources are scarce. You benefit from these interventions, even though you don't fully understand them. The reduced predator pressure makes foraging safer and less stressful. The supplementary food helps you maintain your condition during the lean winter months. And the increased monitoring means that if you ever get sick or injured, help is more likely to arrive quickly. But the human presence also brings stress. The constant surveillance, the unfamiliar scents and sounds, the disruption of natural patterns, all of these factors create a background level of tension that affects your daily life. You're learning to adapt, but it's not always easy. One morning, you wake up to find a strange structure in your territory. It's a wooden platform surrounded by mesh walls, a trap designed to capture kakapo safely for health checks and radio tagging. The trap doesn't look dangerous, but it smells wrong, and you give it a wide berth for several days. Eventually, curiosity overcomes caution. The humans have baited the trap with some of your favorite foods, and the scent is irresistible. You approach carefully, testing each step, ready to flee at the first sign of danger. The food is just inside the mesh enclosure, easily accessible through an opening that looks large enough for you to enter and exit safely. You reach through the opening and grab a piece of fruit. Nothing happens. You take another piece, then another. The food is excellent quality, fresher and more nutritious than anything you've found in the wild recently. Over the course of several nights, you become bolder, eventually entering the trap completely to access the food inside. On the fourth night, your luck runs out. The trap mechanism triggers as you're feeding, and suddenly you're enclosed in mesh walls with no way out. Panic floods your system as you throw yourself against the barriers, calling loudly in distress. The mesh is strong enough to contain you, but not so restrictive that you can't move around inside the enclosure. Hours pass before the humans arrive. You hear them approaching long before you see them, their voices and footsteps announcing their presence in the forest. When they finally reach the trap, you're huddled in the corner, every muscle tense with fear and stress. What happens next will change your life forever, marking your transition from a wild, anonymous bird to a carefully monitored individual in one of the world's most intensive conservation programs. The humans work quickly, but carefully. One of them approaches the trap while speaking in soft, reassuring tones that do nothing to calm your racing heart. You've never been this close to humans before, and their size is overwhelming. They tower above you, their movements deliberate and controlled as they prepare to extract you from the mesh enclosure. A large towel drops over your head, plunging you into darkness. Strong hands grip your body, holding you firmly but not painfully. You struggle instinctively, kicking with your powerful legs and trying to bite anything within reach of your beak. But the towel prevents you from seeing your targets, and the humans are experienced at handling frightened birds. Within minutes, you're inside a portable carrier, still wrapped in the towel, but no longer being physically restrained. The carrier is dark and confined, but it feels safer than being held by those massive hands. You can hear the humans talking outside, their voices muffled but urgent. They're discussing your condition, your approximate age, and the procedures they need to complete before releasing you. The journey to their temporary field station takes about an hour. The carrier sways and bounces as they navigate the forest paths, and motion sickness adds to your already overwhelming stress. You've never been transported anywhere before. Your entire life has been spent within a few square kilometers of familiar territory. Now you're traveling to places you've never seen, in the hands of creatures you've spent your entire life avoiding. The field station is a small building filled with strange smells and unfamiliar sounds. Bright lights hurt your eyes when they finally remove the towel, and you blink rapidly, trying to adjust to the artificial illumination. The room is clean and sterile, nothing like the rich, organic environment of the forest floor. A veterinarian examines you thoroughly, checking your weight, measuring your wingspan, and assessing your overall health. You submit to the handling because you have no choice, but every touch feels like a violation. These humans are gentle and professional, but they're still predators as far as your instincts are concerned. Your heart rate remains elevated throughout the entire process, and you're constantly alert for any opportunity to escape. The health check reveals that you're in excellent condition. Your weight is appropriate for your age, your feathers are in good condition, and you show no signs of disease or injury. The veterinarian takes blood samples for genetic testing, swabs your mouth for disease screening, and documents every detail of your physical condition. Then comes the radio transmitter. It's a small device, weighing only a few grams, but it feels enormous when they attach it to your back. The harness system is designed to be comfortable and non-restrictive, but it's still foreign technology strapped to your body. You twist and contort, trying to remove the device, but it's securely fastened and designed to withstand your efforts. The humans also give you a name. You become aroha, a Maori word meaning love or compassion. It's a fitting name for a bird that represents hope for an entire species, though you don't understand the significance. To you, it's just another human sound in a day full of confusing human activities. The entire process takes several hours, during which time you're kept in a small holding cage. The cage is clean and well ventilated, with food and water available, but it's still a prison. You pace restlessly, testing every corner and crevice for potential escape routes. There are none. You're completely at the mercy of these humans and their mysterious agenda. Finally, as evening approaches, they transport you back to the forest. But they don't release you at the trap site where you were captured. Instead, they carry you deeper into your territory, to a clearing you know well. The familiar sense of home fill your nostrils as they open the carrier door. You don't hesitate. The moment the door opens, you burst out of the carrier and scramble toward the nearest cover. The humans make no attempt to recapture you, and within seconds, you're hidden among the tree ferns, breathing hard and trying to process what just happened. The radio transmitter sits between your shoulder blades, like a persistent itch you can't scratch. It's not painful, but it's constantly noticeable, a reminder of your encounter with the human world. Over the following days, you'll gradually adjust to its presence, but you'll never completely forget it's there. What you don't realize is that your capture and tagging marks a turning point in your existence. You're now part of the official Kakapo recovery program, monitored 24 hours a day by radio telemetry. Every movement you make is tracked and recorded. Your feeding patterns, your territorial boundaries, your interactions with other birds, all of this data is collected and analyzed by researchers trying to understand how to save your species. The monitoring isn't just passive observation. If your radio signal indicates that you're in distress, if you stop moving for too long, or if you venture into dangerous territory, the recovery team will investigate. They'll track you down, assess the situation, and intervene if necessary. You've gained a safety net, but you've also lost a degree of freedom that you'll never fully recover. Over the following weeks, you adjust to your new reality. The radio transmitter becomes part of your daily existence, no more remarkable than your tail feathers or your feet. You resume your normal foraging patterns, but now every movement is documented by researchers who are building a comprehensive picture of kakapo behavior and ecology. The data you provide is invaluable. Your feeding preferences help researchers understand which plant species are most important for kakapo survival. Your territorial movements reveal how much space an individual bird needs to thrive. Your interactions with other tagged birds provide insights into kakapo social behavior that would be impossible to gather any other way, but you're unaware of your scientific importance. You're just trying to survive in a forest that seems increasingly crowded with human activity. New tracking stations appear regularly, beeping softly as they record your radio signal whenever you pass within range. Motion-activated cameras capture your image dozens of times each week. Researchers conduct regular surveys of your territory, documenting changes in vegetation and food availability. The intensive monitoring pays dividends when you encounter your first serious health crisis. You're about 3.5 years old when you develop a respiratory infection that leaves you lethargic and struggling to breathe. Under normal circumstances, this infection might have killed you. Weakened birds are easy targets for predators, and respiratory problems make it difficult to forage effectively. But your radio signal alerts the monitoring team that something is wrong. When you fail to move from the same location for more than 12 hours, researchers are dispatched to investigate. They find you huddled beneath a tree fern, clearly unwell and unable to flee when they approach. Within hours, you're back at the field station, receiving antibiotic treatment and supportive care. The infection responds quickly to medication, and within a week, you're healthy enough to return to the forest. Without human intervention, you almost certainly would have died. Instead, you recover completely and resume your normal activities as if nothing happened. This cycle of monitoring, intervention, and care becomes the backdrop of your adult life. You're no longer just a wild bird struggling to survive in a dangerous world. You're a managed individual in a comprehensive conservation program, protected by technology and human expertise that your ancestors could never have imagined. Your territory continues to expand as you mature. By your fourth year, you control nearly 50 hectares of prime forest habitat, an area that includes multiple feeding sites, several secure roosting locations, and the complex network of trails that connect them all. You know every tree, every slope, every potential danger within your domain. Other kakapo respect your territorial claims, but the boundaries are fluid and negotiated through ongoing interactions. During times of food abundance, you're willing to share your space with neighbors. When resources are scarce, you become more defensive, using vocalizations and body language to discourage trespassers. The forest around you continues to change as the conservation program intensifies. Predator-proof fences create safe zones where you can forage without fear. Supplementary feeding stations provide high-quality nutrition during lean periods. Native plant restoration projects increase the diversity and abundance of your natural food sources. These changes benefit you directly, but they also alter the fundamental character of your environment. The forest is becoming less wild and more managed, shaped by human intervention rather than natural processes. It's still beautiful, still functional as kakapo habitat, but it's no longer the same ecosystem that your ancestors inhabited for millions of years. You adapt because you have no choice. The alternative, extinction, is far worse than any inconvenience caused by human management. Your species has been reduced to fewer than 200 individuals, scattered across a handful of predator-free islands and intensively managed mainland sites. Every bird matters, and every successful breeding season is a victory against extinction. As your fifth year approaches, your body begins showing the first signs of sexual maturity. Your calls become deeper and more resonant, with undertones that weren't present in your juvenile vocalizations. Your behavior becomes more territorial, more focused on establishing and defending prime habitat. And for the first time, you start paying serious attention to the distant booming calls of mature males during breeding season. The breeding system of your species is complex and unpredictable. Males don't breed every year. They wait for massed fruiting events when rimu trees produce massive crops of seeds. These events occur irregularly, sometimes with gaps of several years between them. When they do occur, they trigger a cascade of biological responses that culminate in the most spectacular wildlife event in New Zealand. You're still too young to participate fully, but you're beginning to understand the system. The deep, booming calls that echo through the forest on certain nights aren't just random noise. They're advertisements, challenges, and invitations all rolled into one. Adult males are announcing their presence, their fitness, and their readiness to mate. Females evaluate these calls, comparing the quality and frequency of different males before making their choices. The competition is intense because opportunities are rare. A male might only get a few chances to breed during his entire lifetime, and success depends on a combination of physical condition, territorial quality, and vocal prowess. Females are even more selective because they invest enormous energy in raising offspring, and they can't afford to waste that investment on inferior partners. You practice your own booming calls during quiet moments, developing the vocal power and endurance you'll need when your time comes. The calls require tremendous physical effort. Males can boom for hours at a time, inflating air sacs in their chests to produce sounds that can be heard several kilometers away. It's exhausting work, but it's also the only way to attract females in a population spread thinly across vast areas of forest. Your practice sessions don't go unnoticed by the monitoring team. The researchers who track your movements can hear your calls on their radio equipment, and they note the increasing frequency and quality of your vocalizations. They're building profiles of every bird in the population, documenting the development of breeding behavior and predicting which individuals are likely to participate in future breeding events. This information is crucial for managing the recovery program. The team needs to know which birds are ready to breed, which territories are suitable for nesting, and how to maximize the genetic diversity of offspring. Every mating decision affects the long-term survival of the species, so nothing is left to chance. As winter approaches in your 5th year, the forest settles into its familiar rhythm of scarcity and endurance. Food becomes harder to find, temperatures drop, and many of the insects and fruits that sustain you during the warmer months disappear entirely. You rely increasingly on stored fat reserves and your detailed knowledge of winter food sources. The supplementary feeding stations become more important during these lean months. The conservation team increases the frequency of food deliveries, ensuring that every bird in the population has access to high-quality nutrition. You visit these stations regularly, along with other kakapo in your area. The gatherings are usually peaceful, but there's an underlying tension as birds compete for the best feeding opportunities. These winter congregations provide your first real opportunities to interact with adult females. Up until now, your social contacts have been primarily with other males, territorial neighbors, rivals, and occasional companions during times of food abundance. But the feeding stations attract birds from across the entire population, including the mature females who will be the focus of intense competition during the next breeding season. You observe these females carefully, noting their size, condition, and behavior. They're impressive birds, larger than males, with an air of quiet confidence that comes from surviving multiple breeding cycles. They tolerate your presence at the feeding stations, but they don't actively seek interaction. You're still too young to be considered a serious breeding prospect, and they have more important concerns during the challenging winter months. The winter also brings your first encounter with the conservation team's intensive health monitoring program. Every bird in the population receives regular health checks, and your turn comes on a cold July morning when researchers track you to one of your favorite roosting sites. The capture process is much more efficient than your initial tagging experience. The team uses spotlights to locate you in the darkness, then employs specialized nets to capture you quickly and safely. Within minutes, you're in a transport carrier on your way to a temporary examination facility. The health check reveals that you're thriving under the intensive management regime. Your weight is excellent for the season, your feathers are in perfect condition, and blood tests show no signs of disease or nutritional deficiency. The radio transmitter is still functioning properly, and the harness system shows minimal wear despite months of constant use. The veterinarian also takes the opportunity to collect additional biological samples for ongoing research projects. Feather samples provide information about your diet and stress levels. Genetic material helps researchers understand the evolutionary history of your species and plan breeding strategies to maximize genetic diversity. Even your parasites are collected and studied, contributing to a comprehensive understanding of kakapo biology and health. You're released at the capture site within a few hours, but the brief encounter provides researchers with valuable data about your condition and development. The information goes into a database that tracks every aspect of your life, from your daily movements to your long-term health trends. As your fifth winter progresses, you begin to notice subtle changes in the forest that signal the approach of something significant. The rimu trees that dominate your territory are showing signs of unusual activity. Their branches are heavy with developing fruit, and the air carries a sense that you've never experienced before. You don't understand the significance yet, but you're witnessing the early stages of a massed fruiting event. The rimu trees are synchronizing their reproductive cycles, preparing to produce a massive crop of seeds that will transform the forest ecosystem. This event happens only every few years, and when it does, it triggers a cascade of biological responses that affects every species in the forest. For kakapo, massed fruiting events are the key to successful reproduction. The abundance of high-quality food allows females to build the fat reserves necessary for egg production and chick rearing. It also provides the nutritional foundation that males need to sustain the energy-intensive, booming displays that are essential for attracting mates. As spring arrives and the rimu fruits begin to ripen, you feel a stirring of instincts that you've never experienced before. Your calls become more frequent and more powerful. Your territorial behavior intensifies, and you begin spending more time in the areas of your territory that would be most suitable for establishing booming sites. The conservation team recognizes the signs as well. Radio telemetry data shows changes in movement patterns and calling behavior across the entire population. Researchers begin preparing for what could be the most significant breeding season in decades, an event that could dramatically increase the kakapo population and provide new hope for the species' long-term survival. You're on the verge of participating in one of nature's most remarkable spectacles, but you don't know if you're ready. At 5 years old, you're approaching sexual maturity, but you're still competing against males who have been perfecting their breeding strategies for decades. The next few months will determine whether you're just an observer of this ancient ritual or an active participant in your species' fight for survival. The forest is changing around you, preparing for an event that happens so rarely that most individual kakapo only witness it a few times in their lives. The timing is perfect, the conditions are ideal, and the entire population is responding to biological cues that have governed kakapo reproduction for millions of years. Your education as a wild bird is nearly complete, but your most important lessons are still ahead of you. The challenges you've faced so far, learning to forage, avoiding predators, establishing territory, were just preparation for the ultimate test of survival and reproduction that awaits you in the months ahead. The rimu fruits are ripening faster now, their sweet scent filling the forest with an intensity you've never experienced. Other kakapo are responding to the same biological signals, and suddenly the forest feels more crowded than it has in years. You hear calls in the distance, not the casual contact calls you're used to, but something deeper, more urgent. The older males are starting to establish their booming territories. You watch from a distance as a massive male, easily twice your size, begins clearing vegetation from a small depression in the forest floor. His movements are methodical and purposeful. He scrapes away leaves and debris with his powerful feet, creating a bowl-shaped arena about a meter across. The location is perfect, on a slight rise that will help his calls carry further, surrounded by dense vegetation that provides cover from predators. This is your first real glimpse of kakapo courtship behavior, and it's both fascinating and intimidating. The male works for hours, perfecting his display site. He tests the acoustics by producing short, experimental booms, adjusting the shape and depth of his bowl until the sound quality meets his standards. When he's satisfied, he settles into the center and begins the real performance. The booming call starts deep in his chest, building slowly until it erupts as a sound unlike anything else in the forest. It's not just loud, it's felt as much as heard, a subsonic rumble that seems to come from the earth itself. The call carries for kilometers, advertising his presence to every female within range. He pauses for exactly 60 seconds, then booms again and again and again. You listen from your own territory, counting the intervals between calls. This male will continue booming for hours, sometimes all night, burning through enormous amounts of energy in his attempt to attract a mate. It's an exhausting display of stamina and vocal power, and only the fittest males can sustain it night after night throughout the breeding season. Other males are establishing their own booming sites, and the forest fills with a chorus of competing calls. Each male tries to outperform his rivals, booming longer and more frequently than the competition. The sounds overlap and interfere with each other, creating an acoustic battleground where only the most persistent and powerful voices can cut through the noise. You feel the urge to participate, but you're not ready yet. Your voice is still developing, and your body lacks the size and strength necessary to compete with mature males. Instead, you focus on learning, studying the techniques and strategies that successful boomers use to attract females. Location is crucial. The best booming sites are on ridges or elevated areas where sound carries well, but they also need to be accessible to females and relatively safe from predators. Males spend days scouting potential sites, testing acoustics, and evaluating the surrounding habitat before committing to a location. Timing matters too. Each male develops his own calling schedule, trying to find gaps in the acoustic landscape where his voice can be heard clearly. Some boom primarily in the early evening, others prefer the pre-dawn hours. The most successful males call consistently throughout the night, maintaining their vocal advertisements for 8 or 10 hours at a stretch. The physical demands are enormous. Booming males lose significant amounts of weight during the breeding season, burning through fat reserves to fuel their marathon vocal performances. Their throat pouches become enlarged and calloused from the constant inflation and deflation required to produce the deep, resonant calls. Females begin moving through the forest, drawn by the booming displays, but taking their time to evaluate their options. You catch glimpses of them occasionally, large, purposeful birds moving through the darkness with an air of quiet authority. They're conducting their own acoustic surveys, comparing the quality and frequency of different males' calls before making their choices. The competition intensifies as more males join the chorus. Territories that seemed adequate suddenly feel crowded as established males expand their booming sites and newcomers try to squeeze into remaining spaces. Vocal duels erupt when territories overlap, with males trying to outboom each other in contests that can last for hours. You witness one such confrontation between two mature males whose territories border each other. The conflict starts with increasingly aggressive calls, louder, more frequent, and clearly directed at each other rather than at potential mates. When vocalizations fail to resolve the dispute, the males abandon their booming bowls and confront each other directly. The fight is brief but intense. Both males are enormous, weighing 4 or 5 kilograms each, and when they clash, the impact echoes through the forest. They grapple with their feet, bite with their powerful beaks and use their wings for balance and intimidation. Neither male is seriously injured, but the larger of the two eventually forces his rival to retreat, claiming exclusive rights to the disputed territory. The winner returns to his booming bowl and resumes calling immediately, as if the fight never happened. The loser disappears into the forest, probably searching for an alternative site where he can establish his own display area without interference. These territorial disputes are just part of the breeding process, a way of ensuring that only the strongest and most determined males get the opportunity to attract mates. As the weeks pass, the intensity of the breeding displays continues to build. The most successful males are booming almost continuously, their calls becoming hoarse but no less powerful. Females begin making their choices, approaching the booming sites of males that have impressed them with their vocal performances. You follow one such interaction from a respectful distance, hidden in dense vegetation where you can observe without interfering. A large female approaches a booming male's territory, moving slowly and deliberately through the forest. The male detects her presence immediately. His calls become more urgent, and he begins adding visual displays to his vocal performance. He struts around his booming bowl, wings spread, head held high, showing off his size and condition. His movements are exaggerated and theatrical, designed to demonstrate his fitness and vigor. The female watches from the edge of his territory, evaluating his display with the critical eye of someone who knows that her reproductive investment depends on choosing the right partner. The courtship ritual is complex and prolonged. The male continues booming, but now his calls are interspersed with softer sounds, clicks, chortles, and melodic warbles that showcase his vocal range. He approaches the female cautiously, always ready to retreat if she shows signs of aggression or disinterest. Mating, when it finally occurs, is brief and anticlimactic after the elaborate courtship display. The female allows the male to mount her for just a few seconds before shaking him off and disappearing back into the forest. The male returns to his booming bowl and resumes calling, hoping to attract additional mates before the breeding season ends. The female will now search for a suitable nesting site, somewhere safe and hidden where she can lay her eggs and raise her chicks without interference. The male's role in reproduction is essentially over. He'll continue booming for the rest of the season, but he'll have no involvement in nest building, incubation, or chick rearing. You're beginning to understand the enormous investment that kakapo reproduction requires. Males exhaust themselves competing for mates, often losing 20% or more of their body weight during the breeding season. Females face the even greater challenge of single-handedly raising their offspring in a forest full of predators and competitors. The conservation team is monitoring every aspect of the breeding season, using radio telemetry to track the movements of both males and females. They know which males are booming, which females are approaching display sites, and which pairs are likely to produce offspring. This information allows them to provide targeted support, supplementary feeding for males who are losing too much weight, nest protection for females who choose vulnerable sites, and emergency intervention if anything goes wrong. Your own behavior is changing as you watch the breeding displays around you. Your calls are becoming more frequent and more powerful, though they still lack the depth and resonance of mature males. You've started clearing small depressions in promising locations throughout your territory, practicing the techniques you'll need when you're old enough to compete seriously. The conservation team notices these changes in your behavior. Your radio signal indicates that you're spending more time in elevated areas suitable for booming sites, and acoustic monitoring equipment picks up your practice calls. Researchers update their files, noting that you're approaching sexual maturity and will likely participate in future breeding seasons. But this year, you remain an observer rather than a participant. You're learning invaluable lessons about kakapo reproduction, but you're not yet ready to compete with males who have been perfecting their techniques for decades. The older males have advantages you can't match: size, experience, and the vocal power that comes from years of practice. Some of the females in the population are now nesting, having mated with the most successful males. They've chosen sites carefully, hidden depressions beneath dense vegetation, often located on slopes that provide good drainage but are still accessible for feeding trips. The nests themselves are simple affairs, just shallow scrapes lined with soft materials, but their locations are critical for the survival of eggs and chicks. The conservation team begins its most intensive phase of monitoring as soon as nesting begins. Every known nest is equipped with remote cameras and sensors that can detect changes in temperature, humidity, and activity levels. Researchers can monitor incubation progress without disturbing the birds, intervening only if problems arise. This level of surveillance might seem intrusive, but it's necessary given the precarious status of the species. Every egg is precious. Every chick represents hope for the future, and the conservation team can't afford to lose offspring to preventable causes. They've learned from previous breeding seasons that intensive management produces better outcomes than leaving birds to manage on their own. Some nests fail despite the monitoring and protection. Eggs may be infertile, incubation may be interrupted by predators or weather, or chicks may die from disease or developmental problems. Each failure is documented and analyzed, contributing to the knowledge base that guides future conservation efforts. But many nests succeed, producing healthy chicks that will eventually join the adult population. These successes are celebrated by the entire conservation community, researchers, volunteers, and supporters who have invested years of effort in saving the kakapo from extinction. You hear the evidence of successful breeding in the forest around you. The calls of females tending chicks, the rustle of movement at nest sites, and eventually, the first tentative vocalizations of juveniles learning to communicate with their mothers. It's a sound that hasn't been heard regularly in New Zealand's forests for decades, and it fills you with instincts you don't fully understand yet. As the breeding season winds down, the forest gradually returns to its normal rhythms. Males abandon their booming sites, exhausted from months of intensive calling. Females focus on raising their chicks, a process that will occupy them for the next several months. The acoustic landscape becomes quieter, dominated once again by the normal sounds of a forest at night, rather than the spectacular chorus of competing males. You emerge from the breeding season with new knowledge and new ambitions. You've learned what it takes to compete for mates, and you've begun developing the skills you'll need for future breeding opportunities. Your practice booming calls are becoming more sophisticated, and you've identified several potential display sites within your territory. The conservation team's post-breeding assessments reveal the success of the season. Several females have produced healthy chicks, adding new individuals to the population and improving the species' genetic diversity. The intensive management approach has paid dividends, with higher breeding success rates than might have occurred under purely natural conditions. But the work is far from over. The chicks now face the same challenges you encountered as a juvenile, learning to forage, avoiding predators, and establishing their own territories. Many won't survive to adulthood, but those that do will represent the future of the species. You're now 6 years old and approaching your physical prime. Your body has reached its full adult size. Your voice has gained the power and range necessary for effective booming displays, and your territorial knowledge is comprehensive. You're ready to participate in the next breeding season whenever it occurs. The forest settles into its post-breeding quiet, but beneath the surface, preparations for the future continue. Young birds practice their survival skills. Established adults maintain their territories, and the conservation team plans improvements to the management program based on lessons learned from the recent breeding season. Rimu trees throughout the forest are already beginning their next reproductive cycle, though it may be several years before conditions are right for another massed fruiting event. When that time comes, you'll be ready to compete with the best males in the population, armed with knowledge gained from years of observation and practice. The seasonal cycle continues, marked by the familiar rhythms of foraging, territory maintenance, and survival. But now these activities carry additional meaning. Their preparation for the ultimate biological imperative of reproduction. Every meal you eat, every territory you defend, every skill you develop contributes to your readiness for the next opportunity to pass your genes to future generations. Your radio transmitter continues to broadcast your location and activities to the monitoring stations scattered throughout the forest. The data you provide helps researchers understand kakapo behavior, habitat requirements, and population dynamics. You've become an unwitting participant in one of the world's most comprehensive wildlife research programs. The technology that tracks your movements is constantly evolving. New sensors can monitor your heart rate, body temperature, and activity levels in real-time GPS units, provide precise location data that helps researchers understand how you use your territory. Acoustic monitoring equipment can identify individual birds by their vocalizations, tracking social interactions and communication patterns across the entire population. This information feeds into complex computer models that predict population trends, identify threats, and guide management decisions. Your daily activities contribute to scientific knowledge that extends far beyond kakapo conservation, informing efforts to save other endangered species around the world. But you remain focused on immediate concerns, finding food, maintaining your territory, and preparing for future breeding opportunities. The broader implications of conservation science are beyond your understanding, but your survival instincts serve the same ultimate purpose as the researchers' sophisticated analyses. Winter arrives again, bringing its familiar challenges of food scarcity and cold temperatures. You've survived enough winters now to be confident in your ability to find food and shelter during the lean months. Your territory includes several reliable winter feeding sites, and you've learned to supplement natural foods with visits to the conservation team's feeding stations. The feeding stations have become important social centers during winter months. Multiple kakapo gather at these sites, creating temporary communities that provide opportunities for social interaction and information exchange. You've learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of these gatherings, understanding when to assert your dominance and when to defer to larger, more experienced birds. These winter congregations also provide opportunities to interact with females outside of breeding season. The interactions are generally peaceful and non-sexual, but they allow you to evaluate potential mates and establish social relationships that may influence future breeding success. One of the females you encounter regularly at feeding stations is particularly impressive, large, confident, and clearly experienced in successful reproduction. She tolerates your presence, but doesn't actively seek interaction. You study her behavior carefully, learning the subtle signals that indicate her mood and intentions. This female represents the kind of mate you'll need to attract when your time comes. She won't be easily impressed by inexperienced displays or half-hearted courtship attempts. Winning her attention will require the best booming performance you can produce, backed by the physical condition and territorial quality that demonstrate your fitness as a breeding partner. The conservation team continues its year-round monitoring and management activities, predator control operations, remove introduced species that threaten kakapo survival, habitat restoration projects improve the quality and quantity of native food sources. Research studies investigate every aspect of kakapo biology, from genetics to behavior to disease susceptibility. You benefit from all these efforts, even though you're usually unaware of them. The reduced predator pressure makes your daily life safer and less stressful. The improved habitat provides more diverse and abundant food sources. The health monitoring program ensures that medical problems are detected and treated before they become life-threatening. Your 7th year brings subtle changes in your behavior and physiology that signal approaching reproductive readiness. Your booming calls are becoming more frequent and more powerful, approaching the quality of mature breeding males. Your territorial behavior intensifies, and you begin spending more time evaluating and improving potential booming sites within your territory. The conservation team notes these changes in their ongoing assessments. Your behavioral profile indicates that you're likely to participate actively in the next breeding season, competing with established males for access to females. This information helps researchers predict breeding outcomes and plan management interventions. Forest conditions are also changing in ways that suggest another massed fruiting event may be approaching. Rimu trees show signs of synchronized reproductive activity, and other plant species are responding to the same environmental cues that trigger kakapo breeding behavior. The timing isn't certain. Massed events are notoriously unpredictable, but the signs are promising. If a breeding season does occur in the next year or two, it will be your first real opportunity to participate as a mature male. You'll be competing against experienced birds who have successful breeding records, but you'll have advantages too: youth, vigor, and years of preparation for this moment. The prospect both excites and intimidates you. Breeding success requires not just physical readiness, but also strategic thinking, persistence, and the ability to adapt to rapidly changing social dynamics. The stakes couldn't be higher. Failure means waiting years for another opportunity, while success means contributing to your species' survival and recovery. As your 7th winter progresses, you intensify your preparation for potential breeding opportunities. Your practice booming sessions become longer and more frequent, building the vocal stamina you'll need for marathon calling displays. You scout and improve multiple potential booming sites, creating options that will allow you to adapt to competitive pressures and territorial conflicts. Your body condition is excellent, the result of years of successful foraging and the supplementary nutrition provided by conservation feeding programs. Your territorial knowledge is comprehensive, covering not just your own domain, but also the surrounding areas where breeding activities are likely to occur. The radio transmitter that has tracked your movements for years continues to function reliably, providing researchers with detailed data about your preparation for breeding. The information contributes to predictive models that help the conservation team anticipate and plan for breeding season logistics, but technology and scientific analysis can only go so far. When the time comes, your success will depend on the same biological imperatives that have driven kakapo reproduction for millions of years: the ability to attract mates through displays of fitness, vigor, and genetic quality. The forest around you holds the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of kakapo who faced the same challenges you're preparing for. Their success in surviving and reproducing under natural conditions created the genetic foundation that gives your species hope for recovery under modern conservation management. You carry that evolutionary heritage in your genes, your instincts, and your behavior. The skills you've learned, the territory you've established, and the physical condition you've maintained all serve the same ultimate purpose that has motivated every kakapo that came before you: the drive to survive, reproduce, and ensure the continuation of your species. The next phase of your life will test everything you've learned and determine whether you join the ranks of successful breeding males or remain a peripheral observer of your species' reproductive activities. Either outcome will contribute to the scientific knowledge and conservation efforts that may ultimately save kakapo from extinction. But for now, you focus on immediate preparations, maintaining your condition, perfecting your calls, and waiting for the environmental signals that will trigger the next breeding season. When that time comes, you'll be ready to compete for the opportunity to contribute to your species' future, carrying forward the evolutionary legacy that has brought kakapo through millions of years of existence to this critical moment in their history. Spring arrives with unusual intensity, and the signs you've been watching for finally manifest in ways that make your instincts surge with anticipation. The remu trees burst into the heaviest fruiting you've ever witnessed. Their branches sag under the weight of countless seeds, and the forest floor becomes carpeted with fallen fruit that releases an intoxicating sweetness into the air. This is it, the massed event that triggers everything. Within days, the entire kakapo population responds to biological signals that have been building for months. Males throughout the forest begin establishing booming territories with an urgency you've never seen before. The acoustic landscape transforms as mature birds claim the best sites and begin their marathon calling displays. You don't hesitate. Years of preparation have led to this moment, and you move quickly to secure one of the booming sites you've been developing within your territory. It's not the most prestigious location. That honor goes to older, more established males, but it's acoustically sound and strategically positioned where females are likely to hear your calls. The site preparation is exhausting work. You scrape and claw at the forest floor, removing every piece of debris that might interfere with sound transmission. The bowl needs to be perfectly shaped, deep enough to amplify your calls, but not so deep that it traps sound. You test the acoustics repeatedly, producing experimental booms and adjusting the dimensions until the resonance satisfies your instincts. Other males are doing the same throughout the forest, and competition for the best sites is fierce. You witness several territorial disputes as established boomers expand their domains, and newcomers try to squeeze into remaining spaces. The conflicts are brief but intense, with massive birds grappling and striking each other until dominance is established. You avoid direct confrontations, focusing instead on perfecting your own site and developing your calling technique. Your practice sessions have paid off. Your voice has gained the depth and power necessary to compete, though you still lack the stamina of males who have been booming for decades. When you produce your first serious boom from the completed site, the sound surprises even you. It starts deep in your chest, building pressure until it erupts as a subsonic rumble that seems to shake the forest itself. The call carries for kilometers, announcing your presence to every kakapo within range. The response is immediate. Other males adjust their calling schedules to compete with your voice, creating an acoustic battleground where only the most persistent and powerful calls can be heard clearly, You settle into a rhythm. Boom, wait 60 seconds, boom again. The pattern becomes hypnotic, consuming your entire existence. Hours pass in this state of focused calling. Your throat becomes sore, your chest muscles ache from the constant inflation and deflation, but you don't stop. This is what you've been preparing for your entire adult life, and failure means waiting years for another opportunity. As night deepens, the forest fills with the overlapping calls of competing males. Each boom carries its own acoustic signature, some deeper, some more resonant, some more frequent than others. Females throughout the forest are evaluating these displays, comparing the quality and persistence of different males before making their choices. You've been booming for 6 hours when you detect movement at the edge of your territory. Your calls become more urgent as you sense the approach of a potential mate. Through the darkness, you catch glimpses of a large female moving deliberately through the forest, drawn by your vocal display. It's the impressive female you've observed at winter feeding stations, the one whose attention you've hoped to earn. She approaches cautiously, evaluating your display with the critical assessment of someone who knows that her reproductive investment depends on choosing the right partner. You intensify your performance, adding visual elements to the vocal display. Between booms, you strut around the bowl with wings spread, head held high, demonstrating your size and condition. Your movements are exaggerated and theatrical, designed to showcase your fitness and genetic quality. The female watches from the forest edge, neither approaching nor retreating. She's seen countless courtship displays and won't be easily impressed by flashy movements or desperate calling. What she's evaluating is your stamina, your consistency, and the underlying health that allows you to sustain such an energy-intensive performance. You modify your calling pattern, incorporating softer sounds between the thunderous booms. Clicks, warbles, and melodic trills demonstrate your vocal range and add complexity to the display. These subtle vocalizations require precise breath control and muscular coordination, serving as indicators of your overall fitness. The courtship continues for hours. The female remains at the territory edge, occasionally moving closer to examine your bowl and assess the quality of your site selection. Her evaluation is thorough and methodical. She's not just choosing a mate, she's selecting the father of her offspring and evaluating whether your territory can support successful reproduction. Dawn approaches, and your voice is becoming hoarse from the marathon calling session. Your body has burned through enormous amounts of energy, and you can feel your strength beginning to flag, but the female is still there, still evaluating, and you can't afford to show weakness now. You summon reserves of energy you didn't know you possessed, producing a series of booms that are deeper and more powerful than anything you've achieved before. The sounds seem to come from the earth itself, resonating through the forest with primal authority that speaks to millions of years of evolutionary pressure. The female's posture changes subtly. She moves closer to your bowl, no longer maintaining the cautious distance she's kept throughout the night. Her body language suggests interest, though she remains alert and ready to retreat if your performance disappoints her. You approach her carefully, reading every signal she provides. One wrong move, one sign of aggression or clumsiness, and she'll disappear back into the forest. Your movements are deliberate and respectful, acknowledging her dominance in this interaction while still demonstrating your own confidence and capability. The mating, when it finally occurs, is brief and almost anticlimactic after the elaborate courtship ritual. The female allows you to mount her for just a few seconds before shaking you off and stepping away. But those few seconds represent the culmination of years of preparation and the potential beginning of your genetic contribution to the species' future. The female doesn't linger. Within minutes of mating, she disappears back into the forest, already focused on the next phase of her reproductive cycle. She'll search for a suitable nesting site, somewhere hidden and secure where she can lay her eggs and raise chicks without interference from predators or competitors. You return to your booming bowl, exhausted but exhilarated. The mating was successful, but the breeding season is far from over. Other females may be attracted to your calls, and each additional mating increases the chances that your genes will be represented in the next generation. You resume booming, though your voice is noticeably weaker than it was earlier in the night. The marathon calling session has taken its toll, and you're beginning to understand why experienced males lose so much weight during breeding season. The energy demands are enormous, requiring every calorie you can consume just to maintain basic calling ability. The conservation team's feeding stations become crucial during this period. Between booming sessions, you make quick trips to supplement your natural foraging with high-energy foods provided by researchers. The supplementary nutrition helps sustain your vocal performance, though you're still burning through fat reserves at an alarming rate. Other males in the forest are facing the same challenges. The acoustic landscape changes throughout the breeding season as some birds exhaust themselves and reduce their calling frequency. Others maintain consistent displays, their superior condition allowing them to outlast the competition. You fall somewhere in the middle of this spectrum. Your calls remain regular and powerful, but you lack the seemingly inexhaustible stamina of the most successful males. Still, you've managed to attract and mate with at least one high-quality female, which represents a significant achievement for a first-time breeder. Days pass in a blur of calling, feeding, and brief periods of rest. Your territory becomes the center of your universe, with every activity focused on maintaining your booming display and attracting additional mates. The outside world fades into irrelevance as your entire existence narrows to this single, all-consuming purpose. The radio transmitter on your back continues broadcasting your location and activities to monitoring stations throughout the forest. Researchers track your movements between booming site and feeding areas, documenting the energy expenditure and behavioral patterns of breeding males. The data contributes to scientific understanding of kakapo reproduction and helps guide conservation management decisions. But you're unaware of this scientific scrutiny. Your focus remains entirely on the immediate demands of courtship and competition. Every boom you produce is a gamble, an investment of precious energy in the hope of attracting mates and achieving reproductive success. 3 weeks into the breeding season, you encounter your first serious territorial challenge. A younger male, probably participating in his first breeding season, attempts to establish a booming site within your acoustic territory. His calls interfere with yours, creating confusion that could drive away potential mates. The conflict escalates quickly. You abandon your booming bowl and confront the intruder directly, using a combination of aggressive vocalizations and physical displays to assert your territorial rights. The younger male is inexperienced but determined, and he doesn't retreat immediately. The confrontation becomes physical when vocalizations fail to resolve the dispute. You grapple with the intruder, using your size advantage and superior experience to dominate the encounter. The fight is brief, but decisive. The younger male retreats to establish his territory elsewhere, leaving you in undisputed control of your booming site. You return to calling immediately, as if the interruption never occurred. Territorial disputes are just part of the breeding process, a way of ensuring that the most determined and capable males get the best opportunities to attract mates. Your successful defense of your territory demonstrates your commitment and capability to any females who might have witnessed the encounter. The breeding season continues with relentless intensity. You've now been booming for nearly a month, and your body shows the strain of sustained energy expenditure. Your weight has dropped significantly, and your calls are becoming hoarser, despite your best efforts to maintain vocal quality. But your persistence pays off when another female approaches your territory. This one is younger than your first mate, probably breeding for the first time herself. She's more tentative in her approach, less confident in her evaluation of your display, but she's clearly interested in what you have to offer. The courtship ritual follows the same pattern as before, but this female requires more convincing. She spends longer at the territory edge, observing your performance and comparing it to other males she's encountered. Your experience with the first female helps you read her signals more accurately, adjusting your display to address her specific concerns and preferences. The second mating is even more satisfying than the first, representing confirmation that your breeding strategy is sound and your displays are competitive with more experienced males. 2 successful matings in your first breeding season exceeds your most optimistic expectations and suggests that you have the potential to become a highly successful breeder. As the breeding season winds down, the forest gradually returns to its normal acoustic patterns. Males abandon their booming sites one by one, exhausted from weeks of intensive calling. The thunderous chorus that has dominated the night soundscape for over a month fades to occasional, half-hearted booms from the most persistent boomers. You're among the last to stop calling, driven by instincts that demand maximum effort until the very end of the breeding opportunity. Your final booms echo through the forest with diminished power but undiminished determination, advertising your continued availability to any late deciding females. When you finally abandon your booming bull, you're exhausted but triumphant. You've successfully participated in your first breeding season, mating with 2 high-quality females and establishing yourself as a competitive breeding male. Your genetic contribution to the next generation represents hope for your species' continued survival and recovery. The immediate aftermath of breeding season is a period of recovery and reflection. Your body needs time to rebuild the fat reserves burned during weeks of intensive calling. Your voice needs rest to recover from the strain of continuous booming. Your territory needs attention after weeks of neglect while you focused entirely on reproduction. You return to the familiar routines of foraging and territory maintenance, but everything feels different now. You're no longer just a survivor trying to make it through each day. You're a proven breeder with the potential to contribute significantly to your species' future. The knowledge changes your perspective on everything from daily foraging decisions to long-term territory management. The conservation team's post-breeding assessments reveal the success of the season. Multiple females have produced healthy clutches, and early monitoring suggests that many eggs are developing normally. The intensive management approach has paid dividends once again, with higher breeding success rates than might have occurred under purely natural conditions. Your own contribution to this success becomes apparent over the following months as researchers track the females you mated with. Both have established nests in suitable locations, and both are successfully incubating eggs that show signs of normal development. The radio telemetry data confirms that your matings were fertile and that your genetic material will be represented in the next generation. This information fills you with satisfaction you can't fully articulate. The biological imperative that drove your breeding behavior has been fulfilled. You've successfully passed your genes to offspring who will carry your evolutionary heritage into the future. From a conservation standpoint, you've contributed to the species' recovery and helped ensure that kakapo will continue to exist for future generations. But your role in reproduction isn't finished. The chicks developing in those eggs will eventually hatch and begin their own struggles for survival. While you won't be directly involved in their care, that responsibility belongs entirely to their mothers. Your genetic contribution will influence their chances of success. The traits that allowed you to survive and thrive in the forest will be passed to your offspring through the complex inheritance patterns that govern all life. Your ability to find food, avoid predators, and navigate the social complexities of kakapo society will influence their development and behavior. Your vocal abilities, territorial instincts, and reproductive success will shape their own potential for future breeding. This genetic legacy represents the ultimate purpose of your existence from an evolutionary perspective. Every challenge you've faced, every skill you've developed, and every decision you've made has served the goal of successful reproduction and the continuation of your genetic lineage. As autumn progresses, you focus on rebuilding your condition and preparing for the challenges ahead. The next breeding season may be years away, but the recovery period between massed events is crucial for maintaining the physical condition necessary for future reproductive success. Your territory requires attention after weeks of neglect during breeding season. Food sources need to be reassessed, boundaries need to be reinforced, and potential improvements need to be identified. The intensive focus on reproduction has left gaps in your territorial management that could create vulnerabilities if not addressed quickly. You also need to rebuild relationships with neighboring kakapo that may have been strained during the competitive breeding season. The acoustic battles and territorial disputes that characterized recent weeks need to give way to the more cooperative relationships that facilitate survival during non-breeding periods. The forest around you is returning to its post-breeding quiet, but the effects of the recent massed event continue to reverberate through the ecosystem. The abundance of rimu seeds has supported not just kakapo reproduction, but also population booms in other species, rats, mice, and stoats that will create increased predation pressure in the months ahead. The conservation team recognizes this threat and intensifies predator control operations accordingly. Poison drops, trapping programs, and habitat modifications all work to reduce the impact of introduced species that threaten kakapo survival. These efforts provide crucial protection for the newly hatched chicks that represent the future of the species. Your own safety benefits from these predator control measures, but you remain vigilant and alert to potential threats. The forest may seem peaceful after the intensity of breeding season, but danger is always present for a flightless bird in an ecosystem dominated by introduced predators. Winter approaches with its familiar challenges of food scarcity and cold temperatures. But this winter feels different because you face it as a proven breeder rather than just another survivor. Your successful participation in the breeding season has changed your status within the kakapo community and your own sense of purpose and achievement. The feeding stations established by the conservation team become important social centers once again as kakapo gather to supplement their winter diets. These congregations provide opportunities to interact with other successful breeders and share the subtle social bonds that help maintain population cohesion during difficult periods. You encounter the females you mated with at these feeding stations, though the interactions are now purely social rather than reproductive. They're focused on the demanding task of raising chicks, and their body language reflects the stress and exhaustion of single parenthood in a challenging environment. The chicks themselves remain hidden in their nest sites, protected by their mother's vigilance and the conservation team's monitoring systems. You won't see them until they're old enough to venture away from the nest, but their existence represents the tangible result of your breeding success and the hope for your species' continued recovery. Your radio transmitter continues to broadcast data about your movements and activities, contributing to the scientific understanding that guides conservation efforts. The information you provide helps researchers optimize habitat management, predator control, and supplementary feeding programs that benefit the entire population. But your most important contribution remains the genetic material you've passed to the next generation. Those developing chicks carry your evolutionary heritage, along with traits inherited from their mothers, creating new combinations of genes that may prove crucial for the species' long-term survival and adaptation. As your 8th year begins, you're no longer just a young adult learning to survive in a dangerous world. You're an established breeding male with proven reproductive capability and the experience necessary to compete successfully with the best boomers in the population. Your future breeding opportunities will benefit from the knowledge and confidence gained during your first successful season. The forest cycles through its familiar seasonal patterns, but you now understand these rhythms in the context of kakapo reproduction and the conservation efforts that support your species' recovery. Every change in vegetation, every fluctuation in food availability, and every shift in predator pressure affects not just your individual survival, but the broader success of the recovery program. Your territory has become a crucial component of the managed ecosystem that supports kakapo survival. The feeding sites you've identified, the roosting locations you've established, and the travel routes you've developed all contribute to the habitat matrix that enables successful reproduction and chick survival. The next massed fruiting event may be years away, but when it comes, you'll be ready to compete at the highest level. Your experience, physical condition, and territorial knowledge will allow you to establish premium booming sites and attract the most desirable mates. Your genetic contribution to future generations will help ensure that kakapo continue to exist and thrive under human protection. But for now, you focus on the immediate challenges of survival and territory maintenance. Each day brings new opportunities to refine your skills, strengthen your condition, and prepare for whatever challenges the future may hold. Your success as both an individual and as a contributor to species recovery depends on maintaining the same vigilance and adaptability that have carried you through your first 8 years of life. The story of your existence reflects the broader narrative of kakapo conservation, a combination of natural instincts, human intervention, and evolutionary resilience that offers hope for one of the world's most endangered species. Your survival and reproductive success represent victory against extinction and proof that intensive conservation efforts can succeed when applied with dedication, resources, and scientific rigor. Your chicks thus hatch in late spring, breaking free from their shells while you're miles away, completely unaware that your genetic legacy has just entered the world. 2 healthy offspring emerge from the eggs laid by your first mate, while your second mate successfully hatches 1 chick. You'll never meet them, never feed them, never teach them the skills they'll need to survive. That's not how your species works. Their mother handles everything alone. She keeps them warm, feeds them regurgitated fruit and leaves, and protects them from the countless dangers that fill their world. The chicks are helpless at first, blind, barely able to move, completely dependent on her constant care. She can't leave them for long, which means her own foraging time is severely limited. The conservation team monitors every nest site with cameras and sensors, documenting the progress of each chick without disturbing the family. They know which birds are yours before you do, tracking the genetic lineage through careful record keeping that spans generations. Your offspring are assigned identification codes and become part of the database that governs every aspect of kakapo management. Meanwhile, you're focused on your own recovery. The breeding season left you 20% lighter than you started, and rebuilding that condition is crucial for long-term survival. You spend your days foraging methodically, taking advantage of the lingering abundance from the massed fruiting event. Rimu seeds are still scattered throughout the forest, providing high-quality nutrition that helps restore your depleted fat reserves. Your territory feels different now. The booming bowl sits empty and silent, a shallow depression that served its purpose and now awaits the next breeding opportunity. You maintain it occasionally, removing debris and keeping the acoustics clear, but without the driving urgency that characterized breeding season. It's become just another feature of your domain, important but not immediately critical. Other males in the forest are going through the same recovery process. The acoustic landscape has returned to normal patterns, contact calls, territorial announcements, and alarm signals, but none of the thunderous booming that dominated recent months. The forest feels quieter, more peaceful, though you know that peace is temporary. Summer brings its own challenges. The abundance of Rimu seeds attracts not just kakapo, but also the introduced species that threaten your survival. Rat populations explode, fed by the same massed event that triggered your breeding season. Where there are rats, stoats follow, and the predation pressure increases dramatically throughout the forest. The conservation team responds with intensive predator control operations. Helicopters drop poison baits across vast areas, targeting the rat population before it can establish itself permanently. Trapping networks expand to catch stoats and other mammals that pose direct threats to kakapo. The operations are successful but create temporary chaos in the forest ecosystem. You instinctively avoid the poison baits, but the disruption affects your daily routines. Helicopter noise forces you into dense cover for hours at a time. The scent of poison and dead rats creates an atmosphere of unease that keeps you constantly alert. Your stress levels remain elevated for weeks until the operations conclude and the forest begins to return to normal. The efforts pay off when chick survival rates exceed expectations. Your offspring are among the survivors, growing rapidly under their mother's care and the protection provided by reduced predator pressure. They're developing the strength and skills they'll need to survive on their own, though that independence is still months away. You encounter your first mate occasionally at feeding stations, but she's focused entirely on her maternal duties. Her body language is different now, more alert, more defensive, constantly scanning for threats that might endanger her chicks. She tolerates your presence but doesn't seek interaction. You're no longer relevant to her immediate concerns. Your second mate proves to be an exceptional mother. Despite being younger and less experienced, she successfully raises her single chick through the vulnerable early weeks. The conservation team's monitoring data shows steady weight gain and normal behavioral development, suggesting that your genetic contribution has produced a healthy, viable offspring. By late summer, your chicks are old enough to venture short distances from their nest sites. They're still dependent on their mothers for food and protection, but they're beginning to explore the world beyond their immediate surroundings. Their movements are clumsy and uncertain, lacking the fluid grace that comes with experience. You catch your first glimpse of one of your offspring during a foraging trip that takes you near your first mate's nesting area. The young bird is about half your size, covered in mottled juvenile plumage that provides excellent camouflage among the forest vegetation. Its movements are tentative but curious, investigating fallen logs and low hanging vegetation with the focused attention of a creature learning to distinguish food from non food items. The sight triggers instincts you didn't know you possessed. There's no parental bond in the traditional sense. You've never interacted with this chick and won't play a role in its upbringing. But something about its genetic similarity to yourself creates a subtle recognition, a sense of connection that transcends conscious understanding. The mother appears immediately, positioning herself between you and her offspring. Her posture is unmistakably threatening, wings slightly spread, head lowered, ready to defend her chick against any perceived threat. You retreat without confrontation, understanding that your presence is unwelcome and potentially disruptive to the family's routine. Autumn arrives with cooler temperatures and the familiar transition toward winter scarcity. Your chicks are now large enough to accompany their mothers on extended foraging trips, learning the skills they'll need for independent survival. They're still clumsy and inefficient, dropping more food than they eat and making far too much noise for creatures that depend on stealth. But they're learning rapidly. Each day brings new discoveries about which plants are edible, which routes through the forest are safest, and which sounds indicate danger. Their mothers are patient teachers, demonstrating techniques repeatedly until the lessons are absorbed and retained. The conservation team continues its intensive monitoring of the new generation. Each chick is weighed regularly, its growth tracked against established benchmarks. Blood samples provide genetic information and health status. Radio transmitters will eventually be fitted to track their movements and survival rates as they mature. Your own condition has stabilized after months of careful foraging and recovery. Your weight has returned to pre-breeding levels, and your voice has recovered its full power and range. You're physically ready for whatever challenges the coming winter might bring, and your territorial knowledge has expanded to include new feeding sites discovered during your post-breeding explorations. The seasonal feeding stations become active again as natural food sources begin to decline. You establish regular visitation patterns, timing your arrivals to avoid conflicts with more aggressive birds while ensuring access to the supplementary nutrition. These stations are crucial for maintaining condition during the lean months ahead. Your first winter as a proven breeder feels different from previous years. You have the confidence that comes with reproductive success, but you also understand the full extent of what that success requires. The energy expenditure, the territorial competition, the physical demands, all of it takes a toll that extends far beyond the breeding season itself. Other successful males in the forest show similar patterns of recovery and preparation. There's a subtle change in social dynamics among proven breeders, a mutual recognition of shared experience and capability. The hierarchies that govern access to prime feeding sites reflect not just size and age, but also breeding success and genetic contribution to the population. Winter brings its familiar challenges, but also unexpected opportunities. A late-season fruit drop from native fuchsia trees provides high-quality nutrition just when you need it most. You discover the resource through careful observation of other birds' movements, demonstrating the social learning that helps kakapo survive in challenging environments. The feeding discovery leads to your first significant territorial expansion in years. The fuchsia grove lies just outside your traditional boundaries, but its seasonal importance justifies the energy investment required to claim and defend it. You establish new scent markers and patrol routes, integrating the area into your existing territorial network. The expansion brings you into contact with neighboring birds whose territories overlap the disputed area. Most conflicts are resolved through vocalizations and displays rather than physical confrontation, but the negotiations require constant attention and energy expenditure. You learn to read the subtle signals that indicate when compromise is possible and when firm boundaries must be maintained. Your chicks spend their first winter under maternal protection, but they're becoming increasingly independent. By late winter, they're foraging on their own for significant portions of each day, though they still return to their mothers for supplementary feeding and protection during dangerous periods. The conservation team's survival data shows that your offspring are thriving despite the challenges of their first winter. Their growth rates remain within normal parameters, and their behavioral development suggests they're acquiring the skills necessary for independent survival. The genetic traits you've contributed appear to be well suited for the current environmental conditions. Spring arrives with the promise of another year of growth and learning. Your chicks are now large enough and skilled enough to survive on their own, though they won't be fully independent for several more months. The transition from maternal care to self-sufficiency is gradual, with increasing periods of separation punctuated by occasional reunions for feeding and social interaction. You observe this process from a distance, watching as your genetic legacy takes its first tentative steps toward full adulthood. The young birds are developing their own territorial preferences and foraging strategies, though they still lack the experience and confidence that come with age and practice. Your own focus shifts toward preparing for potential future breeding opportunities. The forest shows no signs of another imminent massed event, but the cyclical nature of Rimu reproduction means that another breeding season will eventually occur. When it does, you'll need to be ready to compete at the highest level once again. Your territorial improvements continue throughout the spring and summer. You identify and develop additional potential booming sites, creating options that will allow you to adapt to changing competitive pressures. Your vocal practice sessions become more frequent and intense, maintaining the skills that prove so crucial during your first breeding season. The radio transmitter on your back continues to function reliably, providing researchers with detailed data about your post-breeding behavior and territorial management. The information contributes to scientific understanding of kakapo ecology and helps guide conservation strategies for the entire population. But your most important contribution remains the 3 healthy offspring that now share the forest with you. They represent hope for the species' future and proof that the intensive conservation program can produce successful breeding outcomes. Their survival and eventual reproductive success will determine whether your genetic contribution becomes a permanent part of the kakapo gene pool. By your 9th year, you've established yourself as one of the most successful males in the population. Your breeding record, territorial holdings, and physical condition all mark you as a prime specimen, exactly the kind of individual that conservation programs depend on for long-term species recovery. Your offspring are now approaching their 2nd year of life, large enough to be mistaken for adults, but still lacking the full size and experience of mature birds. They've survived their first winter independently and are beginning to establish their own territorial preferences within the forest. One of your offspring, the male from your first mate's clutch, shows particular promise. His growth rate has exceeded expectations, and his territorial instincts are already well developed. He's chosen an area adjacent to your own domain, close enough for occasional interaction, but far enough to avoid direct competition for resources. The other chick, a female, has dispersed further from her natal area. Radio telemetry data shows she's established herself in suitable habitat several kilometers away, where she's learning the complex skills that female kakapo need for eventual reproductive success. Her survival represents potential breeding stock for future generations. Your second mate's offspring, also a female, has followed a similar pattern of dispersal and establishment. She's chosen territory in a different direction, ensuring that your genetic contribution is distributed across multiple areas of the forest. This dispersal pattern reduces competition among siblings while maximizing the chances that at least some of your offspring will survive to breeding age. The conservation team tracks all these developments through their comprehensive monitoring system. Your family tree is documented in detail, with genetic relationships mapped and breeding potential assessed for each individual. The data informs management decisions about habitat protection, predator control, and future breeding programs. Your own status within the population continues to evolve. You're no longer just a successful breeder. You're becoming a cornerstone individual whose genetic contribution may prove crucial for long-term species recovery. Your offspring carry combinations of genes that could be vital for adapting to future environmental challenges. The forest ecosystem around you is also changing in response to ongoing conservation efforts. Native plant restoration projects have increased the diversity and abundance of food sources. Predator control operations have reduced the threat from introduced species. Habitat connectivity improvements have made it easier for kakapo to move between different areas safely. These changes benefit not just you, but the entire population, creating conditions that support higher survival rates and more successful breeding outcomes. The forest is becoming more like the ecosystem that supported kakapo for millions of years before human colonization disrupted the natural balance. Your territorial knowledge now spans nearly a decade of experience, encompassing seasonal variations, long-term changes, and the subtle patterns that govern resource availability. This accumulated wisdom makes you increasingly efficient at finding food, avoiding dangers, and navigating the complex social relationships that characterize kakapo society. The next massed fruiting event remains years away, but when it comes, you'll be ready to leverage your experience and status for maximum reproductive success. Your proven track record, prime territorial holdings, and refined courtship skills will make you a formidable competitor for access to breeding females. Your radio transmitter will need replacement soon. The battery life of these devices is limited, and yours has been functioning for several years. The conservation team will eventually recapture you for a health check and equipment upgrade, ensuring that your monitoring continues without interruption. But regardless of technological surveillance, your life continues to follow the ancient rhythms that have governed kakapo existence for millennia. Foraging, territory maintenance, social interaction, and preparation for reproduction, these fundamental activities remain unchanged despite the intensive human management that now shapes your environment. Your genetic legacy grows stronger with each passing season as your offspring mature and develop their own survival skills. They carry forward the evolutionary adaptations that allowed you to thrive in a challenging environment, combined with traits inherited from their mothers that may prove equally valuable for future success. The story of your existence reflects the broader narrative of conservation biology, how human intervention can reverse the trajectory toward extinction and create opportunities for recovery. Your survival and reproductive success demonstrate that intensive management can work when applied with sufficient resources and scientific rigor. But ultimately, your success depends on the same biological imperatives that have driven kakapo evolution for millions of years. The ability to find food, avoid predators, secure territory, and reproduce successfully, these fundamental requirements remain constant regardless of the technological tools and management strategies that now support your survival. As your 10th year approaches, you've become one of the elder statesmen of the kakapo population, a proven breeder whose genetic contribution may prove crucial for species recovery. Your offspring are approaching sexual maturity themselves, preparing to continue the genetic lineage you've established through your own reproductive success. The forest that has been your home for a decade continues to change and evolve, shaped by conservation efforts that balance human intervention with natural processes. It's no longer the purely wild ecosystem that your ancestors inhabited, but its functional habitat that supports kakapo survival and reproduction. Your own survival to this point represents a conservation success story, but also a reminder of how precarious existence remains for critically endangered species. Every day brings new challenges and potential threats that must be navigated with the same vigilance and adaptability that have carried you through your first decade of life. The future holds both promise and uncertainty. Another massed fruiting event will eventually occur, triggering another breeding season where your experience and status will be tested against a new generation of competitors. Your offspring may soon begin their own reproductive careers, extending your genetic influence into future generations. But for now, you focus on the immediate requirements of survival and territory maintenance, secure in the knowledge that you've already achieved more than most kakapo ever will. Your genetic legacy is established, your territorial holdings are secure, and your place in the conservation program is assured. The radio transmitter between your shoulder blades continues its steady broadcast, documenting your movements and activities for the scientific community that depends on such data to guide conservation efforts. You remain unaware of your broader significance to the recovery program, focused instead on the daily challenges that define existence in a managed but still dangerous world. Your story doesn't end with quiet dignity in old age. At 14 years old, you're still a formidable presence in the forest, but time is catching up with you. Your movements are slower now, more deliberate. Your calls lack the thunderous power they once had, though they still carry the authority of experience. Your territory has shrunk slightly as younger, more aggressive males have claimed portions of your domain. You've witnessed 3 more breeding seasons since your first success, participating in 2 of them. Your second breeding season produced 1 offspring from a single mating, not the spectacular success of your debut, but still a valuable contribution. Your third attempt was less successful. Despite weeks of booming, you attracted no mates. The competition had grown fiercer, and younger males with stronger voices claimed the attention you once commanded effortlessly. Your offspring from your first breeding season are now adults themselves. Your male offspring has become a successful breeder in his own right, establishing a territory that overlaps with your original domain. He's inherited your vocal abilities and territorial instincts, though he lacks your experience with the subtle social dynamics that govern kakapo interactions. You encounter him occasionally at feeding stations, and there's a subtle recognition between you. Not affection exactly, but an acknowledgement of shared genetics and parallel experiences. Your female offspring have dispersed across the forest, and you rarely see them now. Radio telemetry data, tracked by the conservation team, shows they've both established successful territories and participated in breeding activities. Their genetic contribution to the population represents the continuation of your evolutionary legacy, though you're unaware of their reproductive success. The forest around you has changed dramatically over your lifetime. The conservation program has intensified with new technologies and management strategies that would have been unimaginable when you were young. Motion-activated cameras are everywhere now, documenting every aspect of kakapo behavior. GPS transmitters provide real-time location data with precision measured in meters rather than kilometers. Genetic analysis guides breeding decisions with scientific rigor that maximizes diversity while minimizing inbreeding risks. Your own radio transmitter has been replaced 3 times, each upgrade bringing new capabilities for monitoring your health and behavior. The latest version includes sensors that track your heart rate, body temperature, and activity levels continuously. If anything goes wrong, if you stop moving for too long, if your vital signs indicate distress, the conservation team will know within hours. This technological surveillance has probably saved your life on multiple occasions. When you developed a respiratory infection in your 11th year, the monitoring system detected changes in your movement patterns before symptoms became obvious. Emergency treatment prevented what could have been a fatal illness, allowing you to recover completely and continue your normal activities. But technology can't prevent the inevitable effects of aging. Your joints ache more frequently now, especially during cold weather. Your eyesight isn't as sharp as it once was, making nighttime foraging more challenging. Your digestive system has become less efficient, requiring you to spend more time eating to maintain your body weight. The conservation team has adapted their management strategies to accommodate aging birds like yourself. Supplementary feeding stations now provide softer, more easily digestible foods specifically formulated for older kakapo. Medical interventions have become more frequent and more sophisticated, with preventive treatments designed to address age-related health issues before they become serious problems. Your territorial behavior has evolved to match your changing capabilities. You no longer defend the entire domain you once controlled, focusing instead on core areas that provide the most reliable food sources and secure roosting sites. Younger males have claimed the peripheral areas without serious challenge from you, a pragmatic adaptation that conserves energy for more important activities. Social interactions have become more significant as your physical capabilities decline. You spend more time at communal feeding stations, participating in the complex social dynamics that help maintain population cohesion. Your status as an elder commands respect from younger birds, and your presence seems to have a calming effect on tense situations. The knowledge you've accumulated over 14 years of survival makes you valuable in ways that extend beyond genetics and reproduction. Younger kakapo observe your foraging techniques, learning efficient methods for extracting nutrients from challenging food sources. Your response to danger signals provides guidance for birds who haven't yet experienced the full range of threats that populate the forest. But perhaps most importantly, your continued existence represents hope for the conservation program. Every additional year you survive demonstrates that intensive management can support long-term survival for critically endangered species. Your longevity provides researchers with data about kakapo aging processes helping them develop strategies for supporting other elderly birds in the population. Winter in your 14th year proves particularly challenging. Food scarcity hits you harder than it used to, and maintaining body temperature requires more energy than your aging metabolism can efficiently produce. You spend increasing amounts of time at heated feeding stations, grateful for the artificial warmth that supplements your natural thermoregulation. The cold affects your joints severely, making movement painful and slow. Simple activities, like climbing to preferred roosting sites, become exhausting ordeals that leave you breathing heavily and aching for hours afterward. Your foraging efficiency declines as stiff joints make it difficult to manipulate food items or navigate challenging terrain. The conservation team notices these changes through their monitoring systems and adjusts their support accordingly. Additional feeding stations are established closer to your core territory, reducing the energy expenditure required to access supplementary nutrition. Heated roosting boxes provide alternatives to natural sites that have become too difficult to reach. Medical interventions become more frequent as your body struggles to maintain the homeostasis necessary for survival. Anti-inflammatory medications help manage joint pain. Nutritional supplements address deficiencies that develop when your digestive system can no longer extract adequate nutrients from natural foods. Preventive antibiotics reduce the risk of opportunistic infections that could prove fatal to your compromised immune system. Spring brings some relief from winter's challenges, but your recovery isn't as complete as in previous years. Your movements remain slow and deliberate, lacking the fluid grace that once characterized your navigation through the forest. Your voice has lost much of its power, though you still produce the calls necessary for basic communication and territorial maintenance. The breeding season that year passes without your participation. You listen to the booming displays of younger males from your roosting sites, remembering the exhilaration and exhaustion of your own competitive years. The sounds trigger memories of successful matings and the satisfaction of contributing to your species' future, but they no longer inspire the urgent desire to compete. Your role in the population has shifted from active reproduction to something more subtle but equally important. You've become a repository of survival knowledge, a living example of successful adaptation to the managed ecosystem that now supports kakapo survival. Younger birds benefit from your presence in ways that may not be immediately obvious, but contribute to overall population stability. Summer brings easier foraging conditions, but your aging digestive system struggles to process the variety of foods that once sustained you effortlessly. You become increasingly selective in your diet, focusing on the softest, most nutritious options while avoiding items that cause digestive distress. The conservation team supplements your natural foraging with specially formulated foods designed for elderly kakapo. Your social interactions evolve as other birds recognize your declining condition. Aggressive encounters become rare as younger males no longer view you as serious competition for resources or mates. Instead, you're treated with something approaching deference, not affection, but acknowledgement of your status as an elder who has earned the right to peaceful existence. The autumn of your 14th year brings the first serious indication that your time is running short. A minor injury, a small cut on your foot from a sharp stick, fails to heal properly. Your immune system, weakened by age and the cumulative stress of survival, can't mount an effective response to the infection that develops. The conservation team intervenes immediately when their monitoring systems detect changes in your movement patterns. Antibiotic treatment clears the infection, but the incident serves as a warning that your biological reserves are nearly exhausted. Recovery takes longer than expected, and you never quite return to your pre-injury condition. Winter arrives early that year, bringing unusual cold that penetrates even the heated shelters provided by the conservation program. Your arthritis flares severely, making every movement painful. Your appetite declines as digestive problems worsen, creating a downward spiral where reduced nutrition further compromises your already weakened immune system. You spend increasing amounts of time in a semi-dormant state, conserving energy by minimizing activity. Your radio transmitter shows extended periods of immobility that would have triggered emergency responses in younger birds, but the conservation team recognizes the signs of natural aging and adjusts their intervention protocols accordingly. Medical support becomes constant, but palliative rather than curative. Pain medications help manage your arthritis. Nutritional supplements are administered directly to bypass your failing digestive system. Temperature regulation support prevents hypothermia during the coldest nights. The goal shifts from restoration to comfort, ensuring that your final period is as peaceful as possible. Your breathing becomes labored as your respiratory system weakens. The same lungs that once powered thunderous booming calls now struggle to extract adequate oxygen from the forest air. Your heart rate becomes irregular, reflecting the strain on a cardiovascular system that has supported 14 years of intense survival demands. On a cold night in late winter, you settle into your favorite roosting site, a hollow beneath a massive rimu tree that has sheltered you for over a decade. The location feels appropriate somehow, surrounded by the familiar scents and sounds that have defined your existence. Your radio transmitter continues its steady broadcast, documenting your final hours for the scientific community that has monitored your entire adult life. Your breathing slows gradually, each inhalation requiring more effort than the last. There's no dramatic struggle, no sudden crisis, just the gentle cessation of biological processes that have sustained you for longer than most kakapo ever live. Your heart stops sometime before dawn, marking the end of a life that contributed significantly to your species' survival and recovery. The conservation team discovers your death when morning radio checks reveal a stationary signal that continues unchanged for several hours. Researchers approach your final resting place with a mixture of sadness and scientific curiosity that characterizes their relationship with every bird in the program. Your body represents both personal loss and valuable research material. The necropsy reveals the cumulative effects of aging and environmental stress, but also confirms that you lived longer and more successfully than most wild kakapo ever could. Your organs show the wear expected from 14 years of survival, but also the benefits of intensive medical care and nutritional support. The data contributes to understanding of kakapo longevity and aging processes. Your genetic legacy lives on in your offspring and their descendants. Your male offspring has become one of the most successful breeders in the current population, inheriting your vocal abilities and territorial instincts. Your female offspring have produced healthy chicks of their own, ensuring that your genes remain part of the kakapo gene pool for generations to come. The territory you controlled for over a decade is quickly claimed by younger birds who recognize its value. Your carefully maintained feeding sites, travel routes, and roosting locations become part of the forest's infrastructure, supporting new generations of kakapo who benefit from your decades of territorial development. The conservation program that supported your survival continues to evolve, incorporating lessons learned from your life and death. The monitoring technologies that tracked your movements provide data that improves understanding of kakapo behavior, habitat requirements, and aging processes. Future management strategies will benefit from the comprehensive record of your existence. Your story becomes part of the larger narrative of kakapo conservation, proof that intensive management can support individual survival while contributing to species recovery. Your 14 years of life represent thousands of hours of monitoring, countless interventions, and the dedication of researchers who viewed your survival as both scientific priority and personal mission. But beyond the statistics and scientific data, your existence had meaning that transcends conservation biology. You experienced the full range of kakapo life, the challenges of youth, the satisfaction of successful reproduction, the wisdom of maturity, and the dignity of peaceful death. Your consciousness, however limited, encompassed joy, fear, satisfaction, and the fundamental drive to survive and reproduce that motivates all life. The forest continues its cycles without you, but it's different because you were there. The trails you walked, the trees you climbed, the sites you claimed, all bear the subtle influence of your presence. Future kakapo will benefit from the habitat improvements and predator control measures that protected you, creating a legacy that extends far beyond your direct genetic contribution. Your radio transmitter, recovered from your body, joins a collection of devices that documented the lives of kakapo throughout the recovery program. Each transmitter represents an individual story, a unique contribution to species survival, and a testament to the dedication of people who refuse to accept extinction as inevitable. The data you provided over 14 years fills databases that guide conservation efforts around the world. Your movement patterns inform habitat management strategies. Your breeding behavior contributes to understanding of reproductive ecology. Your aging process provides insights that help support other elderly birds in the population. Most importantly, your survival to natural death demonstrates that kakapo recovery is possible. Your existence proves that critically endangered species can be pulled back from the brink of extinction through intensive management, scientific rigor, and unwavering commitment to conservation goals. Your life was both individual achievement and collective victory. The conservation program continues its work, supporting the descendants you helped create and the population you helped sustain. New technologies will improve monitoring capabilities. Genetic management will become more sophisticated. Habitat restoration will expand the areas available for kakapo survival. But the fundamental lesson of your existence remains unchanged. Every individual matters, every life has value, and extinction is not inevitable if society chooses to prevent it. Your story ends here, but the species continues. Somewhere in the forest, your offspring are foraging, establishing territories, and preparing for their own reproductive opportunities. They carry your genes, your survival instincts, and the biological heritage that connects them to millions of years of kakapo evolution. Through them, your existence achieves a form of immortality that transcends individual consciousness. The night sounds of the forest continue without your voice, but they're richer because you were once part of them. Life as a kakapo might be rough, but it's also magnificent, challenging, and ultimately triumphant when supported by human determination to prevent extinction. Your 14 years prove that survival is possible, recovery is achievable, and hope is justified, even for the world's most endangered species. Here you can find the next story. Click on it. Until then, see you soon.